So, ladies and some gentlemen, I think, welcome to our Super Healers episode, Stories of Progress and Triumph, with none other than Claire Eccelston, joining us all the way from down under New Zealand. Claire is a grandmother. She is a pioneer. She's a stream practitioner, which is about scar tissue work, which we're going to cover later, as part of this interview. She's a teacher. She's been teaching internationally in different schools around midwifery and birthing. She's, at the end of the day, a representative of all things feminine, sacred, and how to take care of yourself. And she's such an integral part of how Philippa got her health back. So I'm honored, actually, to be interviewing you, Claire, today, and having a conversation about, pelvic floors, bodies, healing, our capacity, our innate intelligence, how to unlock it, and of course, some scar tissue work. So, Claire, how are you?
I'm really well, thank you. Thank you for the honor of being here.
Our pleasure. So, Claire, let us into a little bit of your world. Tell us how it got started for you, and yeah, how you ended up doing what you do.
Oh, that is a long journey. Um, I come from a line of very stoic women. My ancestry, my ancestry are Irish, traditionally Irish convicts. So we are very stoic women. We are like the weeds that grow through cement. And my mother was a midwife, and I grew up in the Catholic Church, which is a curious thing because I always, even as a young woman, grew up hearing the way women's bodies were spoken about, hearing the way bodies were spoken about, sexuality was spoken about, and never felt at ease, even as a young girl. And then I wanted to be a midwife from about the age of 16. I discovered spiritual midwifery. And I also heard my mum counseling women with their breastfeeding on the phone since I was little, and became a midwife early, became a mother early. And, I feel like part of why I was put on this earth is to blow on the fire in women's bellies to remind them this body is a holy place and this body is sacred ground. This body is as holy as a church. And I feel like that's such an important and necessary political reclamation of thousands of years of religion and industry and, the culture of humanity trying to separate ourselves from earth and from bodies, and particularly from women's bodies, and shaming women's bodies. So all of the work I do, midwifery, my mothering, my grandmothering, my somatic sexology, and my stream, my scar tissue work, and all comes with the intention of reminding myself and others that the density of this flesh, this heart, these bones, this blood, this womb is as holy and sacred as a church, as a tree, as the ocean. And then it expresses itself in many different forms in my life and how I deliver that.
Oh, wow, beautiful. Did this come to you when you were already a young teenager growing up with wonderful, resilient women around you, or has this been a journey of you self-discovering your path?
No, this would be a journey of self-discovery. I grew up in a really rough Australian town, really, we would call it bogan. I don't know if you know that word, like very salt of the earth, really rough, really the men were very strong and women don't really have an equal place. And I grew up with, particularly from the Catholic Church, a lot of these messages of shaming women's bodies being a place of shame, and my own experiences of childhood having to work through my body being a place of shame. So absolutely no, I mean, my mum as a midwife and as a lactation consultant absolutely was a beautiful inspiration that I could look up to. My grandmother also, but it's almost like I learned it from what I didn't see around me rather than what I did see. Does that make sense?
We lost you there the last 10 seconds.
Yes. Sorry, I noticed that. I thought you were just listening quietly. Yeah, so I grew up, I think it was what I didn't see growing up that really fueled me rather than what I did see. What I did see was a lot of shaming of women's bodies and my own experiences in my life of, being a girl growing up in a rough environment, of having to work through my body as a place of shame. So, and I love that. I love that it was the adversity that has been my biggest gifts. It was the adversity in my life that has cracked me open to God. It was or spirit or divine, whatever you call it. It was adversity that has made me have so much capacity.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So Claire, let's fast forward today a brief moment here. So tell us a little bit more and give us a little bit more into how you work with women's bodies, especially how you work with women that have pelvic floor issues, and what are the common patterns you see, of women that are going through this journey and trying to get themselves out.
Yeah, it's so hard to describe my work because it's like being at a birth. I never know how it's going to unfold. Like, I just had a client come in, and she had put down that she wanted to work with her womb. And I thought, where is this going? And it was actually really deeply about her nervous system and issues of sexual abuse. And so, from a stream perspective, when you're working with scar tissue, it's often the seen and the unseen scars. Like, our bodies are not separate from our experiences, our thoughts, or our mental space, or in our emotional space. So even if I have one-to-one work with women, working with pelvic floor issues, or if I have online work, I always approach it with courageous unknowing that, particularly if I'm working and doing internal pelvic work with women, I never have a preconceived idea of what I'm going to do or what's going to happen. It's really listening to the intelligence of the person, of their body in front of me, and trying first to establish a place where they can guide me into what they know best about their bodies. And probably the main themes I see is the absolute intelligence of people's systems and bodies, that bodies always seek health. They always are seeking homeostasis. And that's also their emotional and mental space as well. That often things we class as faults are our body trying to survive and keep us alive through our nervous system, through our safety responses of flight and fight and fawn and freeze. Yeah. And what I noticed, so that was one thing, how incredibly intelligent our systems are, and particularly when they're listened to with respect, how much a woman knows how to get back to balance, back to health herself. And the other thing that I notice is how intertwined the experiences of bodies are with they're intertwined with our lives. Like, rarely do I see a physical challenge that's not interrelated with a lifestyle factor, or I've had so many years of carrying, or I've had so many years where I didn't say no, or I've had so many years where I didn't honor my own needs. So did that answer your question correctly?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we speak a lot about within Moonrise the concept of listening to your own body, but for a lot of us, a lot of women, and for myself too. I mean, I'm not in the target group, but I'm sort of, my personal experiences. I don't understand how to listen to the signals. I don't understand what this intent really is. So when you speak about, listening, you as a practitioner listening to your customer or client's intelligence communicating to herself and her body, can you give us an example, and can you guide women and me in this case of how you go about fine-tuning this skill, so to speak?
Yeah, good question. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, you can't listen to a body if you're not connected with your body, right? And so I'm quite bones and earth about it. Like, it can seem like such a hippie thing to listen to your body, but it's actually very simple around bringing it back into initially sensation. And sometimes I need to ask people many times, what is it you notice in your body right now? And they'll often give me, oh, my thoughts are doing this, or emotionally I'm feeling this. And I just keep asking until, they're able to say, oh, I'm feeling like my feet feel heavy. I'm feeling some tingling in my chest. I'm noticing, it's almost like we, for thousands of years, I think, get bred out of the connection of the body or the intelligence of the body. So the first step to be able to listen to your body is to be able to connect with your body. The first step to be able to connect with your body is start to notice physical sensations. Oh, I am hot. I am cold. My left leg is numb. And from there, you know, what I notice, it's like with gentle invitation and curiosity, bodies just love to open up. People love to open up when they feel listened to, when they feel acknowledged. Sensation becomes more finely attuned sensation, becomes more subtle sensation. And then, you know, like, well, for me anyway, my body is such a radar. It's such a guide, but it's many years of listening to sensation. So that would be the recipes of how I would start is firstly, physically, in a very grounded, non-esoteric way, what is it you physically notice?
Interesting. You know, I remember watching a wonderful TED Talk many years ago where the speaker, he's no more, his name is Sir Ken Robinson. He speaks about how the education system is training us to get disconnected from our bodies and then goes all the way into our brain and then more and more towards one side of the brain. And it almost seems like we need to unlearn, you know. That's what, am I wrong? Like, how do you go about unlearning, you know, and connecting deeper with your own body? Like, how do you go about doing that? Like, is there, you know, you speak about physical sensations. Is there practices you do to get better at it? You know, and especially if you have symptoms like pelvic floor dysfunction, where do you even start?
Yeah, good question. And I think it's more, not so much, or I think it's an unlearning and it's also a reclaiming. It's a political act to reclaim something that has been tried to be silenced through religion, through industry, through education, through the media, through telling us we're fat and hairy and smelly and dirty and you know, all of those things. I figure if a culture has spent that much time and energy and money trying to repress something, our connection with our bodies, then it must be a really huge and important thing. And you know, like, I think people who are connected with their bodies, when you can feel your own yes and your own no, you become hard to muck around. And people who are hard to muck around are hard to control. And particularly women who are hard to muck around raise children who are hard to muck around. So it's like a sort of
Beautiful.
warriorship.
Yeah, I totally see that. Yeah.
So yeah, I think keeping it really simple, you know, your question was what's a practice? For me, it's a practice of that continued question, what am I noticing in my body? And then acknowledging I'm noticing this, or what are the needs of my body? And not to become, you know, like super precious about it. I need this or I need that, because their bodies have incredible resilience, right? But it's yeah, for me, it's an intention to listen. What is my body telling me, and how can I honor it in any given moment as if it were a church or, you know, the still air of a temple. And probably for me, the way I connect with spirit is through my body. It's through my bones, you know, and the bones are porous, and in the porous holes of bones, you have this still air that's as still as the air of a church or a temple. And it's through my body I'll connect with the movement of my blood or the way that my heart's pumping. Like, what an incredible thing that a heart can pump, just like an ocean to's and fro's from the shore. So for me, it's my body is meditation, and it's also a place of ground, like spine and midline. They are a place where I feel constantly centered inside myself. My spine is not going anywhere. It's a constant place of center, and you know, that's what I reference back to. And I wonder sometimes, you know, commonly to bring it back to the theme of challenges with the pelvic floor or challenges with the pelvis. Sometimes that's the body really requesting really loudly, hey, can you listen to me? Because not only do we disconnect from our bodies, but predominantly what I notice is people disconnect from their pelvis. Predominantly they disconnect from their genitals. And sometimes pelvic floor challenges are a really loud request of the body back into connection or back into offering care or offering nurturing of something that has been made silent for many years. And sometimes it's just the physicality.
Interesting. Interesting. I mean, we speak about symptoms being, like a crying baby. It's your body's way to communicate an imbalance, a step away from homeostasis. How do you integrate sort of scar tissue work in this realm of listening to symptoms as a cry for help, listening to helping, sort of gently nudging your body back to homeostasis? How does sort of scar tissue work come in here, and obviously the other work that you do too? You know.
Yeah, I think the scar tissue work has two prongs, often in scar tissue, the scar tissue itself can hold, because it's that thick sort of build up, it can hold an area almost like, freeze response, like, and within that you have less blood flow, you have less oxygenation, you have less nerve flow. So part of the physicality of working with scar tissue is getting oxygen and blood flow and movement back into the area. And once you've got that, you've got more nerve sensation. The area is more alive because it's more oxygenated. And then the other area with scar tissue is that there can be emotional freeze associated with that. Like, often our bodies will hold experiences until we have the resources to deal with them. So I don't tend to look at it as like I'm holding trauma and I have to get rid of my trauma. It's more about, okay, my body had an experience that was too much, too big, too fast, too soon, too often in that moment that I had resource to metabolize or I had resource to integrate. And sometimes what I've noticed through the listening of the physical scars, there's also a listening of the experience that surprisingly you'd think, like I work with a lot of rape and sexual abuse and birth trauma and abortions and all sorts of things. You would think it would be such heavy and deep and cathartic work. And surprisingly, I find it's not. Surprisingly, when I find that story and the tissue, the physicality of it or the emotionality of it is met with curiosity and listening, it comes up. There might be an emotion, there might be some tears, there might be a need to say F off or to release a little anger, and it comes up and then it goes, and then there's usually some chatting, and it comes like it's rare that when a story that's been held in tissues is released, it's normally like a 4 to 5 minute, not to give it a time frame, but it normally comes up as a flash. There's the tears or the anger or the shame or the shaking or whatever it was, and then it subsides. So
Yeah,
remind
and
me
why
the
why
original
why is it?
question.
No, but I mean you're answering it beautifully. But I'm curious about why is it? Why how is it that the body communicates it the way you just explained it? Is it sort of a programming that we're releasing when you're doing this work? What's actually happening when release when you do a shake, or when you're angry, or when you release it, so to speak? What is actually happening?
I don't really know, but I suppose my observation is often if there's been an experience, like a woman came once and she had a elective cesarean and she had such trauma and she had some issues with her bladder and she couldn't connect with her child and she felt really traumatized by the birth and she couldn't make sense of it because it was an elective cesarean. And we did some work physically, we were doing some work. I think it was externally on the cesarean scar, and then we were working internally. And on one of her sacrotuberous ligaments, one of the ligaments you can easily access intervaginally, we both had this sense that maybe she needed to do some kicking with her leg. And she just kicked a few times. And I said, is there any words there? And she had some strong, F off sort of words. And then she remembered an experience of in the cesarean theatre with an epidural, not being asked consent about a process that happened for her body. And she had a few tears and it released. And then she had this massive sort of more blood flow, more oxygenation, more nerve sensation. And afterwards, she said the symptoms of her bladder resolved, and then her relationship with her child had changed. So I think sometimes bodies and our souls, our beings, they wait until there's an opportunity to hand the story over, to hand the emotion over, to make sense of it when they're resourced enough. So sometimes that happens physically without any emotions, and I don't tend to buy into a story unless a story arises. Sometimes it'll just be this sense that often the client and myself will feel this beautiful fascial sort of, oh, or feel the area start to fill with blood, or the nerve sensation comes back, or, you know, with scar tissue, it might be, you know, muscular or even within ligaments, and that there's a sense of it actually physically shifting under my fingertips. And I find that particularly working into vaginally, because the vagina is so connected with our hearts and our minds, that just to play some touch with presence. And, you know, of course, this is all done with lots and lots of consent and readiness, and just to play some touch with presence, and the person takes a couple of breaths. Usually I feel the tissue actually physically melt like butter under my fingertips. So, you know, bodies love to come back to comfort, and often they'll come back to comfort with so much ease when they're met with loving curiosity and presence.
Oh, beautiful. And that sometimes you can give yourself, that sometimes you need from others. And that's why I jumped into this whole world when I realized my role, in the case of my wife's healing, that sort of unlocked a lot more women in my family coming out and talking about their symptoms. And, you know, so for somebody who's alone, who's listening, you know, who has these issues, who understands it conceptually, that she can listen to her body, where does she start with scar tissue work? Where does she start with unlocking, you know, let's just assume she doesn't have a practitioner nearby, or she doesn't have the money or resources. Like, how would you recommend somebody to get started? And yeah, how do you go about doing this?
Yeah, loving curiosity, the connection of that we talked earlier about asking what are my sensations, and numb is of course a sensation. Numb is really valid. And, you know, even simple things like, would it be that you could start with touch on the area, particularly your own touch with presence and breath? Could it be that you look in the mirror? And for some people, that's just like really few next steps. Could it be that you start with some touch with castor oil? Because castor oil is really high in this, I think it's pronounced vinolonic acid, which is an acid that when it penetrates into the skin, it helps the density of the scar tissue break up. And that can be 10 or 20 years after a cesarean. You know, that if you've had a cesarean and you're feeling that now you're having an impact on the peristalsis or your bowel placement or bladder mobility, starting to work with daily castor oil in the shower, maybe 3 minutes or so after a warm shower, to massage into the area with breath, with presence, because you can just do it mechanically. That'll do a certain amount, but to do it with your intention, to do it with presence, or do another amount. Equally so if you're having, you know, vaginal tears or episiotomy scars, some castor oil after a shower, a few minutes to offer some touch and some movement with the tissue is a really easy place to start, as is castor oil packs, perhaps once a week, where you just soak a cloth with the castor oil and you know, lay for 30 minutes or so with some cloth with castor oil, and then some plastic so you don't get everything so dirty, and then a hot water bottle so that it can really penetrate more deeply into the skin. And of course, good diet, like having lots of good nutrition, helps tissue, helps it to heal well.
For women that are sort of unsure if they have scar tissues in their pelvic floors or in their vaginas, what's the you know, what's your answer?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, most women probably know they've either had a scar tissue from birth, or they've had some surgery, or they've had endometriosis. Although actually this is true, you know, it can be so varied. I would wonder around, you know, asking their body, what if they suspect there's scar tissue there, what is it they suspect? What is it physically that they notice? And what might be the steps that felt right for them to work with that? And of course, most of us have, whether it's physical scar tissue, most of us have in our bodies these sort of unseen scars from all sorts of experiences that we have, falling off swings or falling off horses or falling off trampolines. There can be scar tissue around the coccyx, which can then affect the internal ligaments of the pelvis. So perhaps if they have a suspicion, I would wonder around, just can they talk through with someone or write in a journal? What is it that they suspect? Where is it that they suspect? What are the symptoms that they're noticing? And what for them feels like the appropriate first steps? Because I wonder if someone has a suspicion, what is it that they're knowing about their bodies? What is it that their body is sharing with them?
Interesting. Is there by the way, this is just a question out of curiosity. Is there a tool that can map your body and see if you have scar tissues? Like, is there a way, is there some kind of a mechanism to do that apart from touch? And like, is there like an X-ray or like,
There might be, but I do not know. And
No,
also,
no.
I think it would be quite tricky because some scars, particularly like if you have scarring from recurrent urinary tract infections in your urethra, like that's going to be really hard to map. Then maybe there is. Or if you have scarring from having lots of, penetrative sex before you got good lubrication, or before you're ready, or before you didn't really say yes, you sort of half said yes, but you really meant no. That's really hard to map. And unseen scars, of course, you can't map
Of
because they might
course, of
not be
course.
in the physical.
No. But when
And
you said the
scarring on,
coccyx, yeah.
yeah,
So go.
sorry. The scarring on bone, it's not so much scarring on bone, but sometimes I definitely feel when I'm working in the pelvis, there can be a story that the bone's holding. I call it often like compression and then expression. Like often I'll feel it with a birth. Like if the baby's shoulders have rotated a certain way, I often notice, particularly on I often notice it on the right side of the lower symphysis, pubis at the front. There can be a place where the bone almost feels a bit frozen or bruised or in shock still, or it's still holding that memory of pressure of when the baby rotated through. And something like that you couldn't pick up from any machine, I think. And often, if you're noticing that for yourself, if your baby needed help with his shoulders when they were born, or they had a big head or something, or you had forceps, often the bone itself releases with a lot of ease, with breath and with presence.
Because I've been doing block therapy. I've had a lot of issues with my knee, and I've been working with fascia, like fascian exercises and concept of frozen fascia. And obviously, I see a lot of relief, and there's obviously scarring that's going beneath it, that's causing lack of blood flow. So I was just wondering if there's any tool to visualize. But Claire, this has been wonderful so far. I have a couple more questions before we let you go on to your evening here. So the section that that we're doing this interview is called Stories of Progress and Triumph, and we're collecting stories of women that have walked the path themselves. Would you mind, if you're okay for it, sharing your own story of how you got into this and how you've used the techniques and more to regain yourself? That sort of serves as a beacon for women out there that are doing their journey.
Yeah, mine probably wasn't so much from any birth scars, although I'm very familiar as a midwife about what can happen. Probably for me, and I'm going to go pretty deep and be pretty honest because you asked me the question. For me, it was an experience of sexual abuse when I was 7, quite intense sexual abuse, and that my body became a very unsafe place to be, and I spent a lot of the time of my life not being in my body, and it was actually through dance, through finding a sense of joy in dance, and through craniosacral therapy, actually, that my body, I started to be able to come back into my body as my body was a safe place. So for me, the scars weren't so much physical scars, they were unseen scars of an experience. And there was so much, like there was so much beauty and so much richness in that experience that has informed me and given me so many gifts about being able to listen beyond my body, being able to feel really deeply and empathetically, having a huge capacity, having a really deep connection with spirit, being absolutely hypersensitive and hyper aware to what's around me. And I feel so grateful for the experience now. So for me, it hasn't been so much. Well, it was physical, and it was beyond physical. So, and it's made me so comfortable. I have such a comfort with intensity, you know, with the birth intensity, like when the head's crowning and the woman's screaming, or the intent, you know, if someone comes with some rape trauma or some sexual abuse trauma or some really full-on birth trauma, I have such comfort around it. And probably for me, it was never, you know, the healing that I experienced wasn't about trying to get rid of something, because I had counseled and yelled and screamed and done lots of breath work, blah, blah, blah. All great. But what helped me was to really embrace the ways that my body, my safety responses, my flight or fright, to start to notice and map how I was doing that every day through the day, to start to notice all the shades of shame and where that came up and how that came up. And to start probably, you know, that reclamation of my body. You know, it was triggered by that experience, and that how to be a woman, how to feel powerful in a world where it's quite vulnerable to be in a woman's body, to be smaller and not as strong as. And now I walk through like strange European towns at midnight in the middle of the night, and I feel so rocking. I feel so untouchable. Also, it was the work of Betty Martin and the Wheel of Consent, and really finding my own yes and my own no, and having such ease with that, where safety became from the inside out. Like, I am responsible for my sense of safety. And that was like life-changing for me, that no one else can help me feel safe. It's being able to say no clearly and directly. And I mean, my pelvis just feels so comfortable, and there's so much pleasure there. It feels so good. And of course, I've done lots of urogenital osteopathy. I've done lots of courses because I do that as well, or holistic pelvic care, or lots of internal pelvic work where I've received to be able to give. So of course, if there's lots of blood flow and lots of oxygen and lots of life and lots of awareness, you know, a benefit is then lots of power, but also lots of, my capacity for pleasure is huge. So that's
Wow, what a
a
story
little
of
of my own
transformation.
story. Mm.
What a story of transformation. I mean, thank you for sharing. I never realized I was, you know, opening up that chapter in you. But thank you so much for sharing so boldly. Thank you so much for sharing your path. And it's beautiful to see that that incident or those set of, you know, events has made you the person that you are, stronger and more resilient than ever. So for women out there that are deep in despair, you know, that are trying to walk the path, because by watching you and us chat, they have already invested, you know, they've taken one step forward. You know, what's the word? I guess advice is the wrong word here, but I guess you get the drift. What's your suggestion of how they should look upon this journey of healing, and how they could look upon rather, of the steps that they can embark on, and how they can work with their bodies and not against it?
Yeah, I think sometimes if you're in that place of despair and overwhelm, it can feel like such a massive mountain to climb. And then so often, you know, I've had clients come to me, or even through my own experience, and it can feel like, oh, I've just got to be in the drudgery of hell and healing forever. But actually, what I found is there can be so much resolve and so much ease, and it can happen so gracefully with where we turn our focus. You know, not to be all love and light about things, but it's like bodies and systems love to feel well. They love health. They will always orientate to health. And, you know, rather than looking at, oh, I have to heal this, I have to excavate, I have to get rid of all this trauma, it's like, how do I turn towards what feels good? How do I start to ground into experiences of safety in my body? And it might start in your little finger. It might start off, oh, the only place I feel safe is my little finger. Okay, what's your meditation on that? How can you grow that? I think probably what I've seen over and over again is how much grace and how much ease can happen in the process of restoration and reclamation, that you're not broken. You know, you don't have to spend years of your life well, maybe people feel like this, and I have full compassion for that, but it's not that you are broken. It's not that you have to fix yourself. It's how can you orientate to what feels comfortable, what feels good, what feels graceful. How can there be grace and ease in your reclamation and remembering of what your body already knows, which is like super intelligent and
Yeah.
superpower.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. So look at where you find comfort, start focusing on that and build out from there instead of trying to take control of all details that you don't control. Is that a fair way to look at it?
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about control. I suppose it's more like how do you orientate to what feels good? You know, it
Mm.
can be so easy if you feel broken, if you feel like at the beginning of some healing journey to want to go right into the depths and, fix everything. But what if you're not broken? What if What if it's just that you have stories there that would love to share themselves? How do you build resource so these stories can be shared? Like rather than looking at how do I fix myself, how do I build resource? And building resource is a wonderful thing. What resources me? What helps me feel good? Because if I'm well resourced, then of course my body will love to be oxygenated. It will love to have blood flow. It will love to have mobility and movement between bladder and uterus, or uterus and bowel, between the bones. And what resources me, which is what helps me feel good and grounded and solid and centered.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. Claire, we love you here, at the work we do with Moonrise, and all our women love it. I want to sort of finish off by asking you, where can women find you? And where do you usually hang out, and how should women get in touch with you if they're interested to work with you?
Thank you. So I'm in Aotearoa, New Zealand. I live in Auckland. So, and I travel the world. I travel around Europe and Mexico, Guatemala. So I'm in Europe the later half of the year, but most of the time, the easiest place to find me is, particularly if you don't live in Aotearoa, online. I do Zoom sessions with individuals and couples around scar tissue work and birth trauma and sexuality. And actually, I've been surprised how potent they can be. Whether the woman, if it's needed to be physically, they can touch themselves, or they work with a partner, or sometimes it's, we go to unexpected places. So I'm on Instagram at Claire Homebirth. I'm also have a website, Claire Eccelston Midwife, and also I have an online school called Womb Rhythms where there's preparation for birth and scar tissue healing workshops, and I do a lot on birth craft also in home birth. Yeah.
Oh,
So
beautiful,
my
beautiful. So it can work doing scar tissue with you on Zoom. Is that right? So
yeah.
so yeah. And how do you I'm just curious now. How do you structure it up, and how do you know how to guide? Like everything you spoke about with listening to the body and the signals, and how do you do
Mm.
that over online? Being far away.
Yeah, I've been surprised how successful it's been. Um, and I've worked with people in Ireland and Sri Lanka and Australia and the UK actually. How do I do it? Well, as I said before, it's like I have all my skills that I'm sitting waiting with, and then I wait for guidance from the other person. Sometimes I've taught a woman uh, using a tool through her own internal work, through the mapping of her anatomy and then working with scar tissue with her anatomy. I've talked a couple through it a few times where I've talked the partner with their loving presence through the touch that I would do, through the anatomy that I would attend to. Sometimes the work, even though I'm ready for anatomy work or talking someone through it, sometimes it goes into another pathway of the person's psyche and or their mental and emotional well-being, or the stories that are in the tissues start to be shared. And surprisingly, you can work somatically or with the body because it's guidance. You have your body, I have my body. Whether we are online or not, you are aware of your own body and its sensations, and it's very much teamwork. So I've been surprised how successful it has been working online, either with individuals or with couples.
Oh, beautiful. So for women out there that are not sure about scar tissue work, maybe the school is a good start. Is that a fair way to say it? Yeah, the school that you have online, so they learn the
Uh,
techniques.
that's all. Moonrise is probably the first start because that was
Ah,
my
right. Yeah.
most that was my most sort of specific to scar tissue. Or probably a one-to-one with me would be a first start. If they're a bit concerned, then we can go through what are their
Perfect.
concerns, and then I could lead them through where might be the best avenue. Because the my online one's more for birth scars, but if it's other type of like endometriosis or prolapse or post prolapse or unseen scars, then that's better one-to-one in
So I
terms of
remember
guidance.
Philippa and me doing it as part of her journey, and I remember how uh, initially it was very cathartic. It sort of it got out a lot of emotions for her, and then
Yeah.
she sort of started going more by herself. But I remember, it was such a before and after set of moments for her and for us working with pelvic floor issues. So for anybody listening out there, working with Claire is on the top, should be on the top of your list if you want to regain your health back and start to unleash what the body's intelligence, what the body's capable of. And so Claire, we are big fans of your work here at Moonrise. Philippa could not join me because she has to take care of the kids while I'm doing this, and we did a stone paper scissors, and I won, and I thank my stars for that. I think she should have done a better job talking with you, but at least we got a little bit of you today, and we're really excited for all the work you're going to be doing and for all the women and people that you're helping out. So thank you so much, and yeah, thank you for taking the time.
Thank you so much. I feel really honored. And I just want to also honor Ellen Heed and her
Yeah.
work in the scar tissue remediation field and you for what you're offering to women because I've had so many clients come through who just really love the way that you've set it up and what you're offering in terms of prolapse support and comfort for the pelvis and scar tissue work.
Yeah, me and Philippa call it our third child. So that's what it's
Mm,
become, and I totally resonate with the fact that an experience that sort of knocks you down can be one of the greatest experiences that brings you back up, which was true for your story. It's true for, in a sense, our story here, and for many other women that or people that we've worked with. So, and thank you for mentioning Ellen Heed. She's brilliant too. She's
mm.
such a true pioneer, and thank you for being part of that bigger community and the community growing so well. So really excited about the future with more scar tissue practitioners.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful for the opportunity and deep thanks for what you and Philippa and Moonrise are doing in the world.
Thank you, Claire. Let me just stop the recording.